Revenge doesn't always roar, it can whisper. Sometimes all it takes is a single choice, a single word to topple an empire. For Caitlin Clark, payback wasn't about fiery interviews or social media outbursts. Her response was far simpler. One word: no. No to Geno Auriemma. No to the legacy of UConn. She turned down the $1 million offer that had come crawling back years later.
Like I said earlier, they actually had odds that, she was like third or fourth in the betting odds to be MVP of the WNBA. That's such a slap in the face to every WNBA player. It's unbelievable, right?
On paper, it sounds absurd. Who walks away from over $1 million for just 8 weeks of basketball? But this was never just about money. It was about a man who once dismissed her, belittled her, and treated her like an afterthought. When Caitlin Clark said no, she wasn't just rejecting a contract. She was delivering humiliation to someone who thought he could never be humbled.
That's the worst part about new fans. They have no perspective. There's no context. So they just say ridiculous nonsense.
Revenge doesn't always thunder. It whispers. Sometimes it takes only one choice, one word, to shatter an empire. For Caitlin Clark, payback wasn't found in fiery interviews or social media posts. Her answer was simpler: no. No to Geno Auriemma. No to UConn's legacy. She didn't need his program, his money, or his approval. She built her own kingdom. And when he came back years later with $1 million offer, she turned him away with quiet finality. And that's why this story is bigger than basketball. Points, assists, and trophies weren't the measure here. This was about power. For decades, Geno had been the gatekeeper of women's basketball, the man who decided who mattered, who got the spotlight, and who was forgotten. But Caitlin Clark rewrote that script. She once idolized UConn. Growing up in Iowa, it was the dream. Taurasi, Moore, Stewart, the dynasty. When her turn came, it looked like destiny. The most captivating talent of her generation and the best recruiter the game had ever seen. But the call never came. Geno didn't recruit her. He dismissed her. He excused it later, saying he already had Paige Buchers and didn't want 2-point guards. On the surface, it sounded reasonable. But the disrespect ran deeper. He claimed Clark should have called him if she wanted UConn badly enough. Imagine that. The coach who built his reputation on spotting once-in-a-generation players decided Caitlin Clark wasn't worth the effort, then blamed a teenager for not chasing him. It wasn't just a missed opportunity. It was arrogance. The kind you never forget. So Clark chose Iowa, a program without the banners or mystique of UConn. To some, it looked like settling. But to her it was freedom. She wasn't Paige's shadow there. She wasn't an afterthought. She was the recruit, the one to carry the program. And from the moment she set foot in Iowa City, she changed everything. Her logo threes weren't just shots, they were statements. The sellout crowds weren't just fans, they were proof. The record-breaking TV ratings weren't accidents. Every basket, every viral highlight, every shattered record sent the same message. You didn't see this, Geno. Yet Geno doubled down. Instead of humility, he leaned on arrogance. He brushed her off with patronizing soundbites, calling her just a kid playing in the driveway. He tried to shrink her brilliance into something ordinary. But ordinary doesn't sell out Madison Square Garden. Ordinary doesn't bring the WNBA into the mainstream. Ordinary doesn't command $1 million offers. That irony cut deepest of all. Geno shut the door on her, believing she'd be just another good player. Instead, she built the greatest empire women's basketball has ever seen, without him. So when he finally came back around with a contract in hand, Clark didn't rage or gloat. She simply declined. And in that moment, Geno Auriemma lost more than money or prestige. He lost power. He lost relevance. Still, he couldn't let her go. Whenever her name came up, he forced Paige into the conversation. Paige was just as fearless. Paige could connect with fans too. It wasn't random. It was strategy. Geno wanted the world to believe Clark's success was somehow tied to his dynasty. But the world saw through it. Her brilliance needed no footnotes. She was breaking records, commanding audiences bigger than most professional teams, and shifting the entire conversation about women's basketball. And Geno knew it. The charm masked insecurity, the kind that comes when the spotlight is moving away and you can't stop it. Eventually the mask slipped. Subtle digs gave way to open attacks. By June 2024, on The Dan Patrick Show, the Hall of Fame coach crossed the line he could never return from. He wasn't just undermining Caitlin Clark anymore. He was attacking her fans. And that's when the empire he once controlled slipped for good. Not with a bang, but with a whisper.
The delusional fan base that follows her disrespected the WNBA players by saying she's going to go in that league and tear it apart. There were actually odds on she's third or fourth in betting odds on being MVP at the WNBA. These people are so disrespectful and so unknowledgeable and so stupid that it gives women's basketball a bad name. Okay, so the kid was set up for failure right from the beginning.
Geno Auriemma didn't mince words. He flat out called Caitlin Clark's supporters insane. He said they didn't understand the game. Then, in what many still consider one of the most shocking soundbites of his career, he claimed those same fans were actually hurting women's basketball because they were too dumb to know better. And what was their crime? Daring to believe that a rookie, Caitlin Clark, could compete for MVP. To Geno, that wasn't passion. That wasn't belief. That was foolishness. Diana Taurasi echoed the sentiment. This kid's about to get a rude awakening. But pause and think about the timing. Clark had just brought millions of new eyes to women's basketball. Families were showing up to arenas in matching jerseys. Kids camped outside for the chance at an autograph. For the first time, casual sports fans, people who had never watched a WNBA game in their lives, were tuning into broadcasts. It was a moment that could have been celebrated, embraced, even cherished. Instead, Geno mocked it. He didn't applaud the movement, he belittled it. This wasn't a coach carefully analyzing strengths and weaknesses. This wasn't commentary. This was personal. His attack wasn't just aimed at Caitlin Clark, but at the very people who made her rise possible. The parents, the kids, the newcomers, the fans who were breathing new life into the sport. And because it was Geno Auriemma, the legendary Hall of Fame coach, people listened. His words carried weight. That's why they stung so much. His dismissal of Clark's supporters wasn't just insulting to them. It was an underestimation of her. The message was clear. The hype was empty, the success wouldn't last, and in the end, Geno would be proven right. But that's where the story takes a delicious turn. Because Geno was dead wrong. Clark never fired back on Twitter. She didn't take shots in interviews. She didn't need to. She answered in the only place that mattered, the court. And the results weren't just convincing. They were devastating to Geno's credibility. Rookie of the Year. All WNBA First Team. Fourth place in MVP voting as a rookie. Exactly where her supposedly naive fans had predicted she'd be. The very predictions Geno had ridiculed came true. And with each trophy, each accolade, each shattered record, his authority unraveled. This wasn't just Clark's victory. It was vindication for every single fan he had laughed at. Every parent who bought tickets. Every child who waited for her at the arena doors. Every casual viewer who tuned in because of her buzz. Clark had validated them all. She proved their prophecy right. And the most poetic part. She did it silently. No drama. No gloating. No fiery tirades. Just results. Night after night, she delivered unforgettable performances. Step-back threes from the logo, crossovers that left defenders stranded, assists that lit up highlight reels. When the awards rolled in, there was no debate. Without ever saying his name, Caitlin Clark had silenced Geno Auriemma. Is there anything more poetic than that? For decades, Geno cast himself as the guardian of women's basketball. The all-knowing voice, the kingmaker, the arbiter of talent. But the truth was undeniable. The fans were right, Clark was right, and Geno was wrong. Every arena she sold out, every record she smashed, Every honor she claimed proved it. She didn't need him. Not his approval. Not his program. Not his dynasty. And that's the great irony. Clark wasn't even trying to prove him wrong. She wasn't thinking about him. She wasn't chasing his respect or craving his validation. She was simply being Caitlin Clark. And that alone was enough to expose him, to humble him, and to show the world that he was no longer in control of the story. By the end of her rookie season, the question wasn't whether Clark lived up to the hype. It was how completely she had obliterated every doubt. Geno's words aged like milk in the sun. Bitter, insecure, embarrassingly wrong. Fans now look back on them as some of the worst takes in sports history. But Geno couldn't let it go. He couldn't stomach being wrong. By then, it wasn't just about Clark's game. It was about what she represented. The shift in power, the changing of the guard, the reality that he was no longer the center of women's basketball. And instead of accepting it with grace, he did what he always does. He kept talking. Podcast after podcast. Interview after interview. And through it all, her name never left his lips. Because deep down, Geno knew the truth. He had lost control of the narrative. And Caitlin Clark had taken it from him without ever breaking a sweat.